Stop the show, choppy words and a sloppy flow. Shotgun opera, lock and load. Cock it back and then watch it go. Mama help me, I've been cursed. Death is rolling in every verse. Candy paint on his brand new hearse. Can't contain him, he knows he works. This hurts, I won't lie. Doesn't matter how hard I try. Half the words don't mean a thing, and I know that I won't be satisfied. So why try ignoring him?
All right, what's going on, everybody? I am the one, the only, the WOOKIE. Joined here by the usual cast of Misfit Toys. We got the Smoke Show, Drascore.
Yo, how's it going, guys?
I love that name just kind of stuck. We got Dr. Sheep. You're Misfit.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the Prince of Pleasantries, Ewok Jr.
Hello, Keyforge community.
We're going to need you to dial back that happiness a little bit.
WOKJR, that's right. Ewok
I didn't call you
Jr.
I did not call you fat.
You're Prince of Pleasantries.
He's always so happy.
I bow to you.
Always so happy. But anyways, we got kind of a different show today. I know I say that sometimes, but I feel like it's going to be Keyforge centric, but not Keyforge centric, but is Keyforge centric. Kind of a little weird. So I kind of want to talk, first and foremost, let's talk about the cost of gaming. Now, many of you have so angrily said when we were doing Flesh and Blood episodes that a lot of you do not like Flesh and Blood. However, a lot of people did too. Yeah, yes. But a lot of people did. You don't know what Flesh and Blood is?
I also don't know what Wordle is.
I played it once.
Wordle?
There
I've
are
played some
many
Wordle.
words I hear, but I don't know what they actually mean.
Yeah, I played some Wordle. I like Wordle. I don't think there's anything wrong with Wordle. Either way, this got me to thinking. So now I think I just told you guys, I've recently sold off my collection of Flesh and Blood. And there's a reason for it. Because I kind of totaled up what my, number one, what I had spent at that point in time. And then I had totaled up like what I was still going to need. And then obviously a new set came out, which shifted the meta. So then I totaled up what I would need for what I wanted after that set. Well, that cost was a little too high for me. So I was going, for those of you who did play Flesh and Blood, I was going to build my Bravo CC deck, which is the classic constructed deck. All right, with everything that I had put roughly $700 into the game on just packs, boxes, stuff like that. Now, a lot of you are going to say, well, that's where you went wrong. You should have just bought the pieces outright, and you're probably right. I would have gotten a lot farther, probably. But from what I had, I still needed another $481 in just singles to build the deck, which for me was it was far too much. And then if I was going to go with the extremely meta Bravo or meta relevant Bravo deck, it was going to be something like, it was like $600 and some odd dollars. I don't remember the exact cost. So at that point, it was too much for me. I'm like, that's too much.
One question.
Yeah.
How much of that is cross-deck playable? Like,
we're gonna get into that a little bit. Bravo.
Fancy Pants.
Uh-huh.
And tomorrow you want to play Samantha Firehair or whatever.
Yep.
Like, is $300 of that get to go over there and get used?
No. Also no. So a little bit of no on both ends. So like the thing that I found, and I do think this is going to kind of end up being Flesh and Blood's downfall, really, is the fact that like you just said, like how much of it was specific to him. Most of it. I would say at least $500 of the cards was specific to his class, which is Guardian. Which means if I want to go play a different character that's not a Guardian, I'm kind of starting all over again. And now I have to spend probably about another $500 to get that person's stuff.
I played this game. It was called Highlander the card game. It also sucked.
Was Highlander that expensive? I don't remember it being that expensive.
I don't actually remember Highlander being a card game, but I wasn't into card games in general that much before Keyforge.
I remember Highlander the game. I never actually ever. That's one of the few card games I don't think I've ever played. So I don't remember it that much.
So what I'm hearing you talk about is we want
Yeah.
today to be able to see what is a competitive deck, to be able to field a competitive deck in multiple different
In a
CCGs or
wide
different
range of
games.
categories,
Yeah.
correct.
So it sounded like the game that shall not be named.
Just say it, Flesh and Blood.
No.
Pokemon.
But
No,
I think
but
that,
fun
I think that,
fact
I think
about
that was the piece, is that you're looking at basically a competitive deck. You felt that you get about 1,200. Is that correct?
So I had posted, like, if I was starting from scratch, had nothing, right? I took the most meta relevant deck for Bravo. I was looking somewhere between $1,400 and $1,500 for it.
Okay.
That was starting from scratch.
And you also have some experience with Pokemon and
Sure.
a little bit.
Well,
more
I mean, it
Go
got
ahead.
me thinking, because, like, I'm like, okay, like, that's just seems expensive. And I know a lot of people are like, well, an average modern deck in Magic's going to cost you about the same. And it's like, well, but nobody plays modern. Like, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe tons and tons and tons of people play modern. And I'm going to open the chat for you guys in the live audience so I can see what you're saying. But maybe in your scene, tons of people play modern. But like where we live, everyone plays standard. Like, I see everyone come out, and I see either two forms of Magic being played, either standard or commander, which I know commander can get quite pricey, but it's a multiplayer format. So you can you can win a game with a subpar deck just because of the format being the format. You can go from 0 to hero quite quickly. So yes, you can spend a lot of money in commander, but I don't think you necessarily have to. But an average standard deck right now to start, and now another set came out, so I don't know what it is, but at the time I was doing it, would cost you anywhere between $300 and $500. An average standard
Okay, so
Magic deck.
we're trying to talk about cost of gaming in general,
Mhm.
which
Right.
several of us are not going to be very good at this, I think, because we are so Keyforge centric.
Right.
We are out of touch. My understanding from listening to people is you potentially can build a pretty competitive Pokemon deck for relatively small dollars, because that game has the wonkiest game economy in the world right now.
Well, it's not. I don't want to say it's wonky, but I think Pokemon has done one of the best jobs when it comes down to cards. So, like, Pokemon's rarity is very strange. Like, cards. So they make playable versions of a card, right? That they probably on the secondary market don't cost much. Like, I looked up the most competitive deck right now, the deck that has the most points, it's a Mew deck. It will cost you $163 to build. That's it. $163 to build. Now, you can go with the very expensive versions of these cards, because some of them have secret rarities and all this jazz. Right. And you can really go crazy and nuts and go the whole nine, and it can cost you a couple grand. But to just get a playable version to where you can go, sit down, feel competent with the cards you have, and play a game, sub 200. Let's even just say, because of everything, maybe Card Kingdom's out or whatever, and you got to go with somebody else. It'll cost you roughly $200. So that led me then to Yu-Gi-Oh! Right? I was like, well, Yu-Gi-Oh! another top end game there, right? So that's probably the one with the biggest spread. You do have some Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, but again, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has that wonky rarity where you can get a common playable version of the card, and then you can spend a bucket of money on the, like, super ultra shiny dingle dangle whatever, right? So it's kind of strange out there too. But I found basically one of the best decks that is out there right now will cost you roughly $200. And then you can go with one of the other decks that's, in that same meta relevancy for $500. And then there's another one for $700. All of them
And
are highly competitive right now. Like,
those are all
it's a coin flip on
comparable
whether
to
you win
each
or not.
other.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that one was probably the toughest one to figure out, because it was like, well, is the $700 deck better than the $100 deck? And then you kind of go down the rabbit hole and you find out, well, not necessarily true. It really does depend on the pilot and the RNG, which is that's something I've always, I want, for me personally, there's a few things I want. I want my player skill to matter. I don't want my wallet skill to matter as much as my player skill. And that's something I've really been craving for. And does that card game? Now I understand there's got to be a, what do you call that? A balance, right? Because the guy, the whatchamacallit's got to make money too, right? But what's the proper balance between wallet skill and player skill? Where does that fall?
I guess, in theory, and I think there's some truth to it, right? It's probably different per game, right? But there's that diminishing returns of spending more, right? So if I just think about Keyforge and I think about, okay, let's say I'm going to spend $20 on the deck versus spending 200 versus spending 2,000. Right?
All right.
Are each of those 10 times better than the previous? Even though they cost 10 times as much each step,
Mhm.
probably not. So there's, I don't know. We're talking about all averages here, so I don't know what the multiplier is each step, right? But there's some sort of you're approaching some sort of, but never achieving probably whatever that perfect deck is. But it's getting increasingly more expensive to get close to it. In
Right.
theory, feels like maybe okay or
Well-
healthy, but I guess
And
it's changing Keyforge though, because it's less of a smooth curve where you can buy cards at
You're buying
individually.
you're buying a deck versus individual cards to swap out.
Right.
What's very interesting is you were talking about your scale of 20, 200, and 2,000 for Keyforge. This is a Keyforge podcast. I immediately wrote down a couple things: fun versus competitive, and I think that's a really, really important piece. I think that, again, $10, you can go ahead and strike the lottery and pull a phenomenal deck that's going to go ahead and win you that VT. However, the likelihood of that is extremely small. Now, that's what FFG is going ahead and balanced their whole principle on and got most of us hooked in this game. Here's just spend $10 and you'll be able to get a deck, and that will be the deck that you can play in adaptive, and you can go ahead and take it. It can win that next Vault Tour. The answer is, after playing many, many games, in my opinion, that likelihood is low.
Right.
And I will honestly say that I love this game dearly. I'll go down. I still think that the money metrics that are here are better than many, many, many other games. I think that you can buy a deck for $20 or $30, and you can go ahead and be extremely competitive in your local, even for store championship. I would even argue that with right on time, that in the right deck, $100, you're in for your store championship for a prime. I think that is 100% legitimate. I think that there are some great Vault Tour decks that are out there that are Vault Tour competitive that you can go ahead and pull in that price range in 100. Now, when you get to that next tier,
in this game, I think you can make day 2 with
that's what I'm saying.
And $100, but
yes,
look
but
at
making it,
most of the Vault Tour winning stuff and all that stuff is.
that's where I'm saying I agree 100%. That's the main difference. Making day 2, you can do it at $100. And so that's where your question is what is competitive? What are you really looking for? I think that $20, I can pull a ton of fun from those decks. They can be absolutely amazing, and they can do wonderful things, and they can be competitive in a local scene or a store championship. But I have seen some of the decks that some of our top players are playing with, and you brought up luck for skill, but that also incorporates then the deck itself. And that deck does count for something. I'm not saying SAS is everything, but it does count for quite a bit. And we have to be able to keep that in mind for top winning competitive decks.
So then the question is, how much is a Vault Tour competitive deck?
Well, do you want Vault Tour winning or do you want Vault Tour
No,
competitive?
I want competitive. If we know,
I can make
here's
day
the
two
deal.
with $100. That's what
Here's
I just
the deal, because we know that
I don't know
once
if that's
those
actually true, but you can definitely give it a try.
I think that there are decks in each of our collections that are in that $100 range that we can go ahead and make day two with.
With a little bit of luck. Because, I mean,
But that's, I mean,
know
I would say
$1,000 decks that haven't made day two that are better than any of my $100 decks.
correct, but this is where Keyforge has a unique setup. One, it's an algorithmically generated deck, and so you have some weaknesses, some restrictions. And two, it's coming down to what you're going to face. I had this more saved for next week, but frankly, what ended up happening, my DT deck that I practiced and played in the DT versus MM, I finished 4th in our practice run, and I didn't win a single game when it came into DT when we went to day 2. And that's actually the difference of me making our final event. I ended up winning the MM that was given to me. I just needed one more win. But it comes down to matchups more frequently than I think people are aware of in Keyforge. And there are some really bad matchups. And there's some bad draws too.
All best of one, which makes
It's
luck
tough.
and swing a bigger factor.
Yes, I agree.
So when we get down to it, we're talking about competitive level decks. And the interesting and maybe odd comparison that there is for this versus other games is the top meta deck that you will see at Worlds in any constructed card game is quite literally the exact same deck you will see in moderately competitive locals, maybe give or take a card or two on each person's deck, but like it's literally the exact same deck, right? Like
Yes.
they took the same list of cards, they built the same deck, and they're playing it. And it's a different competitive, like I'm trying to get my thoughts straight there, right? That it's the same deck at the very top as the best guy in your local 10-man pool in your town of 60,000 people or whatever, right? Like
Correct.
It's literally the same deck.
Because you can go ahead and field that from what exists online, and you can copy it. You might sub out a card here or there, but that doesn't exist in Keyforge with a full deck.
That's a big difference in Keyforge is that there are only X number of what we'll just generically call $1,000 decks right now, which people can argue on if anything is worth that much, because nothing is. How's it ever hold any real value? But anyways, right? Z
used to always go ahead and make the argument that there was no A tier deck, and I think that.
No
S tier. You are correct. No S tier. But I think that's what so many people strive for, including myself for the longest time. Every deck has a weakness. How can you minimize that weakness and go ahead and play to your best outs? And there are a number of decks that have much better outs than others.
Sure, but I'm saying, like, you're playing a different
style
thing here, right? Because we can't play the exact same decks. So there is that sort of increases value in decks because of rarity and the fact that you can't be playing mine or even something that's within 2 cards of my deck at all in Keyforge, where in all the other games is, which that makes it just even more interesting that the decks cost so much money when you're buying clones. And Keyforge is just all unique in that it's just a different thing to price, which is also one of those things, like, it makes your local metas often it's easier to win in your local meta with a cheaper cost Keyforge deck, unless you're in a local meta where you got guys with a bunch of ridiculous power stuff. Like, could you imagine playing my favorite beat stick, X-Ray, like picking on him? Could you imagine playing against X-Ray on a week-by-week basis if he was bringing out the stuff he owns? Like,
well, I think I think about X-Ray. I think about, frankly, many of the members in ABR who are playing in the same local there. There's some really strong locals. I mean, even I think of the now defunct Sanctimonious group, and you have some strong groups in the middle of the states here in St. Louis, and that you can't underscore some of these individual metas. But I think that's also what's fun is then when you come to Vault Tours, you can see those groups coming out, and you may know how to beat that player or those decks, but others don't. They've never seen that, and so it brings a new flair to the game, especially when you're playing in a competitive environment.
So from a cost perspective, like it's interesting because I definitely seen in Keyforge and in the local metas I was involved in when we had local metas of more than a few players. Those of us with the bigger spending power often wouldn't bring our best stuff. We would be playing much more like Drazkor has for the longest time, which is we would find decks that were interesting to us that weren't necessarily good and play more for the fun of trying to get the deck to do whatever thing it was doing than like come out with a top meta deck. I don't know how that happens in Magic, except and some of these other card games, any of these other card games. I don't know how self-metering happens in those games to keep local
It doesn't.
interesting. Outside
It
of
doesn't.
a lot of people just play in their sealed version events. I know a lot of
Right.
people that's the only competitive or store level Magic they'll play in are the sealed events because of the cost. Like sealed becomes the thing that sort of addresses cost in these games. That's your playing field leveler, is we're each only playing with 3 or 6 packs and we're building whatever deck we're doing, and that's your leveler on spending power, right? We each can only spend the exact same amount. And that's exactly
And is
how Keyforge works, right? We each spend
that's
$10 on deck and you play whatever you get. And I guess Keyforge is maybe, well, obviously, most of us sitting here right now think that Keyforge is the best version of that. You know, I've tried Magic Sealed again, and it was okay, but afterwards, like, I had no attachment to those cards, never wanted to build a deck with them, and left them in a pile on the table, because it's like, yeah, I had my fun with these, and now I got nothing to do with them ever again.
Right.
Well, I can't go ahead and really say there's some Keyforge decks that we open and we're like, yeah, I don't need to see that again either.
I mean that all of my Ollie's AOA I got, my 4 boxes, I opened it, I played it in an event, and then I reached across my desk and dropped it in a box that is going to get donated to somebody. Like, that is the truth of Keyforge. We've talked about this too. Like, there is such thing as just junk. Even though they're unique, it doesn't change the fact that they don't have any value or any need to be in this world.
Right.
But then,
I just
what we're trying to talk about costs, try to get us back on that track.
I think the piece that Drazkor was bringing up, when we're looking at a scale of $20 to 200, so if I'm paying 10%, if I'm going ahead and multiplying by 10, so I'm paying 10 times that amount, am I gaining 10 times the satisfaction? And for me, Drazkor, I find that I'm probably more in line with you, that there's rarely a deck that I'm willing to spend 10 times a higher amount and gain the joy. I actually enjoy quite a few of the decks at the $20 range. And that's the type of things that I enjoy. So it's difficult for me to quantify even in C times 100 to be able to go into that range. I struggle with that. I do.
Yeah, and I have thought about, should I just buy, a very good deck, and definitely that sort of that curve has held me back some because I do have so much fun, uh, just buying and playing interesting decks at the $20-$30 level. That's a ton of fun, and I think about like, okay, if I want like to buy a seriously good deck, do I have to spend 10 times as much? Do I have to spend 100 times as much? And if I have to spend
I think a
100
lot of
times
that
as
in
much,
Keyforge
do
runs.
am I gonna really be happy that I spent 100 times as much?
Mhm.
I don't know that I am.
I think that like the main thing, like like you're saying, like this goes way back way. I mean, we're talking years ago. What is the price of a sealed? What is the price of a deck in Keyforge? And it's difficult to quantify, right? Because there's no, like, again, there's not another one like it.
Yeah, and you
So it
have,
makes
you
it
have some
really
people-
difficult to figure out how much is this deck. Is it worth $20,000? Is it worth $2?
But you
I
have
have
a
no
number
idea.
of people who argue it's $10 regardless. And that I used to be more in that camp. I struggle to see. There's definitely quite a range. And Dr. Garfield had never intended for this game to be balanced. And I think hearing that statement actually has really changed my perspective, because there is a huge advantage for someone who's going ahead and spending, not just buying a deck at a time, or here's one deck and that's what I'm playing, but they're going to go ahead and, let's say, buy a case, or buy a couple cases or a couple boxes at a time, and they're just able to have such a higher draw pool to be able to get that deck.
Well, so that, I mean, cost of gaming is a big part of that discussion. Is how should money be addressed in a balancing factor to a game, right? Because you claim a card game or these kinds of games, right? They're supposed to be skill based, and then we all complain about games being pay to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like how
Which I will tell you right now, Flesh and Blood feels very pay to win. Very pay to win. You know what I mean? Like, I've talked to X-Ray, I don't know how many times. He disagrees with me, which is fine.
There's an extent where pay to win runs out in all of these games, though, right? Like,
Yep.
After you've spent your $1,400 on your fancy flash and pan deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have another $1,000 to spend doesn't mean it's going to be better, right? Like, it could be shinier, maybe. I have no idea what's going on in that game, but like, there is a cap where you can't spend more to improve, and that's real pay to win. Where, and this is true of just about every microtransaction game on a phone, that's real pay to win, right? Where it's like, okay, I spent $1,000, so it gives me this many more troops and whatever to fight you with, and you go, well, I spent $2,000 and I have twice as many, and I go, well, I spent 2,000 more, now I have more, and whoever wants to spend the most gets to win, right? That's true pay to win, right? Like, it's whoever has the most money going to win in the end, and none of these games really suffer from that.
Well,
like, spending more money isn't going to get you more.
Sure, yeah. I
It's
mean,
not
there
going
is,
to get you a guaranteed win, is what we're looking at.
That's really the difference between pay to win and then what we're dealing with. Which I'm not saying that the cost in this isn't unsubstantial, but like, no matter what game you look at, the disparity in free income, people's ability to spend money differs so much. Like, even when I played D&D, right? Like, I'm the guy showing up with one book, one set of dice, and a pencil, and I'm like, well, why do I need more than this? And then the guy next to me shows up with $5,000 worth of miniatures and stuff, and it's just because he's got more money to spend and wants to spend it on that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Titanium dice, yeah.
Somebody just brought up Digimon. Average cost in Digimon is anywhere from $100 to $250 for a tier one deck. So Digimon's also in that kind of like that Pokemon range, because I still think I've said it before, I'll say it again. Like, I think they've done the best like money to skill ratio that you can really get, and maybe to a degree Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't know as much about Yu-Gi-Oh as I do Pokemon, where again, Pokemon, they see a card kind of getting out of control, they'll just print it in a starter deck and be done with it, and like now everyone has access to it.
So this was one of the
would
questions
think-
I had. What's your ideal situation as a gamer? Do you want it to be where everyone has access and you can have a cheaper version of that card? Does that make you happier that everyone then has the same access? Do you want it to be unique? Like, what is your goal? And I'm curious for each of you, what's your goal with gaming and the cost of it?
I guess my goal, and I know somebody's gonna be like, well, then you should be playing a living card game, but those are all made by FFG.
You do
Fucking
need to
kill
throw
me.
them in the discussion here briefly for what they are.
I mean, living card games are great. I mean, I played the Star Wars one for a while.
But are they? Because ultimately, to stay competitive, one of those, you end up with just
You
as much
end up, but
money
it's
invested.
sure, but it's spread out over a much shorter amount of time, or a much longer amount of time.
Yeah, but they're also way worse to join after they've started. They're one of the
I was gonna say,
worst
because
to join.
that's their biggest downfall is if you want to get in, now you got to spend buckets.
And then the earlier stuff is now out of print, and you got to spend triple buckets.
Right. So,
Yeah, those
I mean,
are
is there just no?
interesting approach to it.
Am I in just a no-win scenario? I mean, I guess I don't know. Because even then, I thought about miniature games, and I'm like, woof, I don't know what an average 40K army is costing nowadays, but I'm sure it ain't cheap.
All of it. All of your money.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been pricey for 40K. I was like, but then, you could start with Kill Team and then work your way up, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's different ways of doing it. I don't know. I guess I'm just in a no-win scenario because your question was, what am I looking for in a game? I would want everyone to be able to have access to the same amount of stuff, right? And I mean, the one thing that Keyforge it does make me itch for is deck construction, and I know for a lot of people that's not like that's what they love about Keyforge is literally $10, open up a deck, I just play.
Yep.
I have no deck construction, no worries about me. We're all good. To where I kind of miss the deck construction piece.
Well, what about
You know.
playing something like what about playing something like Dominion or something where it's kind of a board game but a card game?
There
A lot of
is not
competitiveness in that.
a
But
competitive scene at your local store
it's true.
level.
That's
for
true.
Most of those kinds of games, that's the
Force of Will.
Yeah, I think that it's.
I have no idea if that's still. I have no idea. What is the?
So it could be wrong. So that's I think clearly when we're talking about card games, we're talking about things that have local events and metas and stuff going on in them. Otherwise, there are lots of other ways and lots of ways you can get around this because there are other card games out there that exist that everything's print and play. And your cost is literally print your cards and play them, and you have zero, but for whatever reason you can't find anybody to play those games with. So they're not really a thing worth discussing in any more depth. And I don't know why, why do cards become so valuable when they have no
Oh, that's actual Force of Will. Oops.
real value? Like there's this whole, and
Well,
my economy brain keeps thinking about that kind of stuff, and I also then think about my brain goes to things should only be worth something that come apocalypse time it still provides usefulness to me. So I'm back to bullets and sheep.
No.
Right? That's what I need. I need more bullets and more sheep and access to
Bullets
water.
and
More
sheep.
bullets. Give me bullets and give me sheep.
But we've assigned what value is there for paper. Money is honestly just paper, but you have people who want to have the most amount of paper. In this case, they want to have the best Keyforge deck. There is a competitive nature that is in humans, and that's what you're seeing, and that's why people will try to be the best or have the most of things. So I see that, but that has been the natural incline to go ahead and have the most or to be the best or to be the top of something.
All right, so Force of Will. I don't know. Some people are still calling it a fad game. About $100 to $150.
Force of Will is a fad game that has been in print for a long time. Well, not a long time.
It's been a while.
2012.
I don't know this. 10 years.
Yeah.
Or fantasy, Final Fantasy TCG is supposedly still in print. That's been around.
Oh, really? For real?
Card fight.
So-
Wow.
I know a few people have played card fight.
Vanguard card fight? I have no idea.
So when we're looking at this, Drazcor, what do you want? Do you want to be able to have equal access for the cards and for the decks for each player? Or do you want to be able to have, where that price can be higher?
I don't know, because so I come from board games, right? So before Keyforge, I was playing a lot of board games where you just buy the thing, right? You just buy Dominion or you buy whatever,
It's
and you
$40.
play that.
Here's your game, and I mean now it's pretty much everything 75. Yes.
Yeah, sure. And now I was, maybe still am, if it whenever it happens again, go to things like the World Board Gaming Championships. So I enjoyed trying to play to win, but yeah, you're just sitting down with the same production copy that was in however many few thousand copies they produced, and you're just playing that game. You're just trying to play it better than other folks.
Yeah, and you have basically a living card game scenario in that everything is equal to all players. You have access to the same game. Correct.
Now,
Okay.
now for Keyforge, Sealed is my favorite, right? So I love just throwing down $10 or whatever, and hey, let's open stuff and let's rock and roll. And yeah, sometimes somebody gets a really good deck or a real poop deck or something, um, but it's a ton of fun, and there's going to be interesting stuff in it. So I still have not gotten to the point where I'm certainly willing to spend $2,000 or something like that on a deck, right? And even 200 I've considered, but then I was like, but it's not going to be like the best of the best, and I don't want to spend 2,000, so I don't spend 200. Like that sort of
So I'm not the one who spent the most money on a deck.
thing.
Well, but I just look at the cost of the game, and that I've been in games where they come along and then they die out,
Mhm.
and I
You
don't
lose all
want it.
your money and you really cry.
Correct. And so that's the piece, is I think that we all have to remember it's a hobby. Spend within your budget. Spend what you feel comfortable, what is reasonable for your economy, for your budget, for your family, for you as an individual. And as long as you're staying in that and you're happy, you're still eating.
That's not at all what I want to hear.
But that's
Screw
what
that. Eat ramen, buy cards.
But that's what needs to
Yeah.
be said,
Don't
is
run a
that
card
Sure.
shop.
but it's a game. Well, anyone who's running a card shop, for the most part, you have issues where you're not going ahead and taking those games home and just sitting and lavishing all of those cards. I think it's a really tough job and a tough business. But I'm going to go ahead and say that play to have fun. That's why we're in gaming. It should be an enjoyment piece, but people
Okay, so
have
here-
extra money to
here's
spend and
where-
others don't.
Here is where the problem is occurring: is play to have fun, right? Like most of us aren't going to disagree with that. Different people's opinion of fun is a whole other thing. But
Yep.
what happens in these games is, well, most people think winning is fun, so they want to win, and then it comes back to who has the money to spend to get more winny. Right?
Yeah. Well, and that's why we
And
see people buying the better deck or spending
but then
more
it
money
also-
to buy more decks. Yes.
The other problem that happens, and I'm as guilty of it as many, is we then price shame people over spending money on decks because they spend more than you're willing, and somehow that's wrong, and that's a really bad attitude to have. Just because they've got more disposable income, you shouldn't shame them for spending on stupid stuff. The problem is that negatively impacts my interaction with the game because they essentially price me out of it, right? And that seems to happen, and that's where pay to win does exist in that essence of you price people out who don't have $1,400 to play a card game, right? Competitively, and that when I am a person that most games I've ever played, I do not play them at a super casual level, right? If I'm going to play them, I want to be able to play them at the top level competitiveness, which is absolutely why I have always stayed away from collectible card games, because that doesn't feel right to me, spending that much money on building the same thing as the next guy. Plus, I don't like building decks, and then somehow Keyforge gets around that me because I can keep opening, and I've opened pretty good decks, so I'm okay there. But like, it's like this whole price thing becomes a thing because it definitely exists in this game, especially as Triad becomes. Every time Triad comes around, like Triad isn't quite pay to win, but Keyforge is a little more pay to win than most other games. Because like if
than
I'm
most
willing to
everything?
spend
Oh.
$20,000 on what is considered one of the top 10 decks in the world in whatever ranking or whatever crap you want to talk about, like once I've spent that money and I have that deck, you cannot buy it. Right?
So here's my other
Yeah,
way I'm
that's
going to
some truth there.
position this. What percentage increase do I gain by buying a $2,000 deck versus a $200 deck? I go to my vault tour. I've spent $200 on this deck, and that's a very wide range, I know. But I've gone ahead and you have less decks to choose from in that $2,000. If I buy $2,000 deck, do I stand a 10% chance better of making it further? A 20%, a 25%, a 50%? What would you guys really place it?
In Keyforge?
Yes.
I mean, I guess it depends on what $5,000 deck you bought.
Well, but I think this is where there's such a range in decks that it causes a huge discrepancy. But let's say that you have vetted, you have looked at it, and you're not getting a great steal at a $200 deck.
Well, we can just
I don't know. I'm just putting
real
200 and
decks with
2,000.
real values, right? Like the real truth of this out here is we can pick a deck that I don't know. Most people have listened to this cast or have seen some top end competitive Keyforge play, like Galaxy, Tycho, Aerosmith, whatever the heck it is. That deck wouldn't trade hands at this point for under $2,000, I'm sure. Right? Like it has never traded hands for cash since it came into the current owner's possession, as far as I know. But I know it wouldn't go for under $2,000. Like it wouldn't, right? I don't even think they would entertain that kind of offer. So that's what I'm saying. Like, so you can just use Galaxy. Like when we're talking about like a $2,000 deck, we just say something like Galaxy.
Fair enough.
And then a $200 deck would be something like, I don't know, what do I know that's maybe $200? Like I might get $200 out of
Xerxes.
Square Bus.
Yeah, Square Bus or Xerxes.
Which is a 91 SAS Worlds Collide deck, won a Prime. It's done well at high-level tournaments, but is not anywhere near on the same level as Galaxy. And I think your chance, same player playing those decks, I think you're twice as likely to make day 2 with Galaxy as you are with
Square Bus. I would agree with that. Yeah.
And then, you know, and that's just in just a vague generic saying like you're playing these decks, matchups, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, I think those few really top end decks that are out there that I've seen are twice as good as anything I own. Like they're gonna double my chances of moving.
So, I'm thinking about, what's constraining the costs of those super top decks, right? Well, and I guess set aside the whatever the hiatus is doing, right? But there's always that risk of like the meta change. Like, what if you pay so much, the new set comes out and it just has like a big counter for whatever you're doing?
I did invest moderately into a Jenka deck, and it is not nearly as good as it used to be. Like Jenka got hurt a lot by mass mutation. So that's definitely a thing. And even like there's some very top end Worlds Collide decks have devalued because they're creature based, like the top end Saurian creature based stuff have been devalued somewhat because the creature control is really strong in some of these new sets.
Yep. Yeah, and the steel hate constraining Coda. A lot of the old Coda good stuff, right? So
Right. Yeah, there are, some of those quad routine job decks that just dominated, that can dominate, like potentially a good anti-steel deck just shuts you down. Right? That is definitely something that exists in Keyforge. That you buy a deck that is very meta strong now, next set could just add a couple of decks that wreck it, like as has been experienced. Decks without hard R in this best of one world we live in Keyforge hit
yeah,
decks that have Heart of the Forest. There's only a couple of them out there, but it only takes a couple of games where you hit stuff like that and you're just done in this world. And when it's best of one, or I mean best of one, but just the way it works, like you can just be killed. Right? This is a matchup dependent game with hard counters. Dealing with that stuff is tough, so you can't buy a deck and expect one deck is always going to be the deck.
Yeah, and like learning those lessons. Yeah, I remember. I think it was a gauntlet you put on Sheep a long time ago, and I did not bring hard R. I just brought some decks I really liked, and I was doing really well. I was like 4-0 or 5-0 or something, and then I just hit like Heart of the Forest and like big artifact stuff, and I just got crushed. No, I also wasn't spending crazy amount of money, but like still, it's like you hit that matchup, and suddenly you're in trouble, and that's you know suddenly that deck isn't looking quite as good as it was just a few moments ago.
My understanding is that's often true in the metas of most card games.
Mhm.
They're little paper rock scissories there
Yeah.
because somebody, like whatever it is, like in Magic, it's currently one of the best decks is going to be just a red haste based deck, and that's just dominating. And then somebody figures out a black ping deck that just deals with it or whatever, and then that deck comes up in the meta because it deals with the deck that shows up most often, and then somebody comes in with a deck that deals with that one, and they fit in the meta in a weird place too, and then it goes back to matchups. Right? That's pretty much true of
Yeah.
every game. And the problem is if you don't have that, then you have what the World of Warcraft, the card game, had very early on, which was there were only 2 decks you could play, and everything else was just a pretender. Right.
And while I would agree that Keyforge has unique decks, I would go ahead and say that the archetypes, there are certain archetypes that you see more often and have definitely set the meta. And so that's just how it's kind of shifted. Instead of a straight deck that's a copy, you see more of this is the archetype and what the deck is trying to do.
There is definitely true in Keyforge archetypes or a few cards
Correct.
that really have to be there to put decks together. Right.
Which was interesting when I think you'll hear a little bit more about this next week with Vault Keepers, but when we saw DT versus DT, you had a couple key concepts really showing up. One of those being straight, very, very high amber generation and a quick amber generation. So that amber burst is what was a key piece that was coming from DT. And that was also made viable because you had a couple decks types or archetypes that frankly allowed you to put lots of amber on cards, and you don't have Infernus running around.
Oh, what was that?
So with Infernus being able to go ahead and be eliminated, that drastically changed what we saw for the archetype. And some people definitely saw that, spotted on, but it was something that showed up more often. I don't know. I like those obscure decks, though, that start to go against that. When you're trying to play paper rock, they're coming in with scissors, and it can really wreck what's happening. So,
sorry for all those of you listening on the. Oop! I hope that didn't. Oh, it did. Did it? I don't know.
My recording.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna use your recording because I have no idea what just happened.
Outside of this.
Yeah, well, if you heard
That was
it, you
dirty.
heard it.
Mm.
I don't know what's going on, but we'll use Sheep's recording. Thank goodness we do backups. Because all of a sudden my computer went. I think my hard drive like disconnected and reconnected. I must have knocked into it or something.
Sounds bad.
So
It's an external.
We're going back to our cost of gaming here. Like,
Yep.
and you're gonna start Wookie. What was your real thought here? Was that card games are too expensive? That
I don't know.
money plays too much of a factor. You know,
Well, this got me thinking as to where do it, because obviously I just sold all my flesh and blood. It's like, where do I go next? Do I go into miniatures where I have a totally different experience? Where the luck of the draw. Because let's face it, like I spent a bunch of money in flesh and blood and I didn't get jack beans, right? I spent even bunches more money in Keyforge, and let's be honest, I don't have really that many good decks.
so
You
are
have plenty
like
of.
me in that you are a gambler at heart when it comes.
Oh,
to
yeah.
games, because that's like
I love
cracking
spinning the wheel.
sealed, and cracking sealed in anything is more or less gambling, which I love, and it's low stakes gambling, right? Like if I lose what I buy in Keyforge cards, it doesn't mean that much to me, and generally I'm able to sell enough of them that it really doesn't hurt too bad. And then there's
Sure.
somebody like Z who was with us, and he almost bought no sealed product. He was a straight just buying the.
No, he
aftermarket
bought
product.
lots of sealed product. I don't know who you're talking about.
No.
Z that was here?
He quit buying sealed. He quit buying sealed after AOA. He bought some.
That's not true at all. He bought a bucket of MM and a bucket of Worlds Collide.
All the MM we bought, we sold.
Oh,
We didn't
okay.
open any of it.
No. This is when Mass Mutation first came out. I thought he bought quite a bit. I know he bought a pallet of Worlds Collide.
Yeah, well, and I think that's part of why is because he didn't open anything there. He quit
Oh.
after that.
Yeah, I mean, like,
there are definitely quite a few Keyforge players that only shop the secondary market and they don't break anything, and it totally makes sense to me because I've broken a lot of decks, and although I'm not super negative, I am also not positive either, right? Like,
right.
it's not a money-making gambit.
But this is what I'm going to go back to, Wookie. What do you want to get from your gaming experience? It's a hobby. So if you're looking to go ahead and crack decks,
Well, here's the thing,
then you got
though.
to keep that in mind. If you want to just have fun, like look at, I hate to say this, but many of the gaming markets, they fluctuate with what is hot in your area.
Sure.
So if you have a gaming group that you can go out and play with and be consistent with, that's what you want to go ahead and do. And it may not be a game that's elsewhere, and it may not be super competitive, but it may be where your local area is super hot and you have a good scene. Then enjoy that. Go ahead and play it. For me, I am right now, while I wish I could play Keyforge in person, that's just not happening in our area. Lokacar is doing a phenomenal job trying to push it. It's not the day that I can get out. But I am enjoying Keyforge online. I appreciate TCO. I desperately hope that this algorithm gets solved in a very reasonable amount of time and we get the next sets, because I'd like to see that. But I am enjoying what I have invested in, what I am playing. Goodness, last night I just opened up, or 2 nights ago, I went back to a 49 SAS, really, 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 really low deck. And I was trying to pull off something that I hadn't done. I found how it can win, and that's where my goal is. So I'm just setting little achievements for myself. Have fun with what you have. You don't need to have more. More does not make people happy. It just, honestly, talking to my financial advisor last week, the statement was, oftentimes people who have more things, more cars, more houses, more blank, those are the people that he's seeing that are the most unhappy. So I would say enjoy what you have, find a good group that's there, and just make the most of it. You don't need anything else, but think what you want to get from gaming and then really tackle that.
And I will tell you, you guys know me. I don't do anything half-assed. Like nothing. Right? I want to be competitive, but I also want to know my player skill matters. Right? That's the biggest portion to me, is that, I don't want my wallet to matter. Because at the end of the day, I could go spend the money. I could go do it. And it wasn't like a financial decision that made me change. It was just like this game is all about this flesh and blood. Unfortunately, what I'm finding right now is all about money. You either have it or you don't. So you're either a has or a has been, right?
So
And that's
when
it.
you start looking at player skill kind of alone, I really think you have to. The truth is, you'd have to step away from
I'd have to step away from
anything called collectible,
right.
right? Because like
And
collectible just puts in like, hey, you're gonna spend stupid money on collecting stuff.
but then again, you look at like, oh, well, we go into miniatures, but it's like, oh, now we roll
But
dice.
you're talking about miniatures, but you know there are lots of other competitive outlets that cost very little. Like you can become a chess player, you can become a Go player, you can become a bridge player.
None of that sounds like fun.
You could go back to playing poker at the casino.
I could go back to playing poker at the casino.
Right? There are things where like in that regard that your money doesn't really impact your ability to play the game right, then it becomes all about how much time investment. And that's actually a big thing in some of these games is like people want to be competitive and they'd rather use their money to get to competitive level than their time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is really where a lot of these card games fit in for much of the working class people who play them is, we'd rather throw some money at what is thankfully things like SAS help us weed out and find better decks, or like decking is a thing, where you can spend a little money to make up for the fact that you can't invest time to find or to build or whatever. That's actually what's always kept me out of going back to miniatures is it's too much of a time investment.
So this led me to two things, right? And I know we're coming up on our time here. I don't know where we're at, but this led me to two things. I could either design my own, right? Design my own card game or whatever it is. I don't know what that entails. I don't know what that looks like. Right? I have no thoughts on it right now. Yeah. No thoughts, no nothing. I literally I am starting from like a scratch basis. I have no thoughts on what it could be, what the design looks like, what it would be based around. Absolutely nothing.
Okay, so this is more of a dream than an action at this point.
I mean, again, I've thought about it. I just where do I go? Where do I start? I've never designed something in my life like this before. You know what I mean? I've never done this. So I guess you're probably more right about it being a dream more than an action. But at the same notion, then I thought about this, and I kind of had this maybe strange idea in my head of, and maybe you guys won't agree with me, and maybe will. I don't know. Either way, for me, keyforge has grown a little stale. Right? I think keyforge needs number one. I think keyforge needs it needs a multiplayer format. Obviously, we no.
Keyforge is great.
Okay. I think keyforge could benefit from a multiplayer format. I think that's where a lot of people are finding a lot of fun, especially in a lot of other card games.
You're saying
where
multiplayer competitive?
Yeah, not even just multiplayer in general, because you don't have to be competitive in a multiplayer format.
I mean, if you're looking for a game where
multiplayer head-to-head, because we already have Keyforge Adventures, which are multiplayer.
That's cooperative. Yes, multiplayer. Yes, like head-to-head. Right. Where there's four of you all trying to create the same goal and beat the other people in that goal. Right. Okay. I don't consider cooperative like.
No.
You're right. It's multiplayer, but it's not what I was thinking.
Because I think when you say multiplayer, other people are going to say, well, there's already the co-op multiplayer. But that's the play that
I don't want to beat the computer. Okay.
Not only do I want to beat you, Sheep, I want to beat Ewok and Drasgor
I want to
at
be
the same
two
time.
other people at the same time. Right. You got it. Right.
Why are you not playing board games? I mean, everything that
I
you've
don't know.
said continues to come back to playing a board game.
Because I just don't. Okay. So where's this competitive board game scene?
Can you please restate the tournaments and the convention you go to every year, Drasgor?
Yes, I understand.
World Board Gaming Championships.
Yes. Which I'm going to be honest with you. What did you say that? Like last week or 2 weeks ago? That is the first time I've ever heard of this event. Like ever. I did not know it was a thing or it existed.
Gen Con.
Most local game stores have a board game night.
Sure. But okay, so that got me to
saying that only the weirdos show up to board game night, and we're like elitist card game players.
That's right.
I enjoy going to board game night. I really
Pinkies
do.
up, bitches. But I thought about this too because I scrolled down the whole like I'll create my own board game, and then I went, whoa. But my mind went, do you know what that all entails? That entails work, which is a whole lot of time. Well, a whole lot of time you don't have, which is kind of when I was talking to my wife about like, where do I go next? What do I do? Should I start Warhammer? And she's like, don't you got to like paint and stuff? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, number one, you can't paint. And I'm like, well, that's true. And she's like, number two, that sounds like time. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, what time do you have? And I'm like, well, you also a valid point. Like, there's no time. So then I got about this whole thing of like, what if? Do you think maybe?
Did you know there's pay to win arguments in Warhammer 40K too?
There's pay to. Is there really? No, I've never heard of those.
Because high level tournaments will always have a paint score.
Sure. Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
And you can take your
pay someone to have
skills or my mediocre painting skills and have a totally presentable playable army. Or you can pay professionals to paint your army and have ridiculous stuff. And there's all kinds of silly spend more money for nothing in that game too. You can also spend tons of money on custom miniatures and figures and bits and bobs and all kinds of There's another game like it, like what I said earlier, like an army costs like $1,000 to get a 1,500 point army on the board these days. And I don't even know if that's true anymore, but I'm guessing
not a clue.
Something in there. But like that is another game where sky's the limit on how much money you want to spend on playing the exact same game as me.
Right. So then this whole idea spouted in my head of like, well, one of my favorite games of all time, which was Star Wars, the CCG, and Star Trek, and a lot of these other games have gone, quote unquote, virtual, where they have taken cards that are already a thing, and they just basically either made new cards or fresh versions of a card, or
you're talking about the player-supported
experience. Right. You got it. Yep. Now, obviously, I don't know, like, because a lot of our stuff is virtual, so I don't even know. Like, I think that's half the issue with a lot of this things is a lot of this stuff's virtual. Well, would TCO support it if that were the case? I don't know. Probably not. But what if you made virtual keyforge, right? We all know things like the shards we thought were super, super cool in the beginning, just never really panned out. What if you make them pan out and you're able to print them, slide them into your decks, and then now you have a completely new deck, different shards, the availability to do different stuff, right? Because AOA had the shards. You have the boats in Dark Tidings. What did Worlds Collide? Worlds Collide had leaders? I don't know if you necessarily want to do the leaders because they're in more than one set, but yeah, the anomalies, right? The brews. I don't remember what was. Yeah, I don't remember what was. I was trying to pick a piece that was specific to each set. Like you won't find. Ow! I got a cramp. Holy shit!
You could fix the bruise. Like I see what you're saying.
Oh.
Like, and I know that other people have already worked on and have functioning deck building algorithms out there where they're using just the current cards and approximately what the current algorithm is, approximately, right?
Yep.
Current algorithm to generate decks. But yeah, to then do whatever you want to call it, Master Set 2, where you then go and take the cards that were good, and then you take the cards that were just total face flops or the things that didn't work in the game, like the shards, which like just need to be better to be good. The brews,
Right.
which just need to be better to be good. And
Right.
fix some of that
I don't
stuff
know
to
what
make them
came in
more
Coda.
interesting to play with and generate new decks that are cool and do fun things.
Right.
You could go fork TCO and do it.
Good what?
Fork it. Could get the source code. Fork the source code.
I gotta say,
I could.
it sounds more like a TTS. Much easier
Mod.
to do on TTS.
Yeah,
where
that's
you
fair.
don't
Yeah.
have
Way
to
easier,
code
for sure.
the effects in. You just have to put text on a card.
Right. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's just I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I'm headed.
Well, if you,
So it's a very tough thing.
Oh.
Like you said, I probably should be in board games.
Yeah, so even
Yeah.
in board games, though, like niche interest is a serious problem. Like there are board games that I really like that are set up to be more campaign or play, but I can't find
Right.
anybody to play them with. So like I don't buy them and I don't get into them because it's just like again you need a group of people to play.
Mm-hmm.
there's guys like the Euros, the Ameritrash, the all the different genres, right, of board games. So you gotta find the right folks that like the things
Right.
that you like.
Yeah, but there's
Mhm.
there's the sports based board games out there that are meant to be played as seasons or leagues or whatever, and it's hard to get to find a group of people to play with them. because
It's
there
hard to
have
get
been
anybody to
people-
commit to anything.
My board game buddies aren't into that. Like Ebok has never expressed any interest in sitting through a grid of sports based games with me, which is it's totally fine. Like whatever. But like it's something I'm interested in doing. But yeah, it's finding that anytime you find niche stuff that interests you, it gets tough. Like if you're really into historical wargaming, like it's hard to find other people to play with in some areas.
Right. And like even then, I thought about getting into like a thing like X-Wing. And then I'm like, oh man, no, Fantasy Flight owns that property, so that's a big
X-Wing's
no.
only okay anyway. I wasn't that big a fan. I'm not a big Archons guy. No.
Again, I haven't played it. I know nothing about it. It's one of those things. It's
I
just
think
tough.
You can still buy Dragon Dice.
I used to like Dragon Dice, but then again, that's luck.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've ever played it.
I've played Dragon Dice. I used to play a lot of Dragon Dice. I mean, you can still buy anything. I'm in some Facebook groups
I think
where
they still make like Dragon Dice is in print.
no, God no. Hold on, I'm googling this right now.
You should get into. You like multiplayer, competitive? You should get into Win Lose Banana. That's what you should.
Win, lose, banana. You know what I need to just do is I need to re-download Tabletop Simulator. We all need to get together because I think we all have it, and we can just play stuff and things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of good board game websites out there. Board Game Arena. There's Yukata. There's a bunch of different ones out there.
I don't know.
think that
I've never tried.
I think that we've brought this to a kind of a wrap. I think
Yeah,
for
I think
me
so.
personally, I still see Keyforge as a great investment for what's there. I think sealed is phenomenal. It's a very, very, very easy access point of $10 to be able to get it sealed. Even 3 decks at $30 for the VTs is phenomenal. And I do think that in comparison to other games, that Keyforge offers some options in that $200 range. I think there are less decks for this highly competitive. And I do agree with what was said earlier that they will give you an advantage. I think there's a little bit of a disagreement about how much of an advantage, but I do think that there is an advantage for those type of decks. The question is, I mean, for me, I'm just not willing to spend the $2,000 on it. So
yeah,
that's what I got from today.
I'm just gonna have Sheep ship me another DT display so I can just open more DT. That's my plan.
The Dragon Dice manufacturer posted 11 hours ago about
Really?
the Tabletopia's tournament semi-sealed and whatever's going on here, and they have a player finder.
Well, tell you what.
Is
Let's
out of
let's.
stock because things suck.
Everybody loves Dragon Dice, huh?
Dragon-
I used to play.
All right, man.
I used to
you're
play the
back.
dwarves. I'm back. I used to play the dwarves. That's what I used to play. Dwarves. Dragon Dice.
All right. Any final thoughts from you guys?
No, if you guys have any suggestions for me, let me know. If you guys think that like virtual cards could be a cool thing, let us know. I'd love to hear it. I think designing 7 cards would be much easier than 300 to design a new game.
What's the game that they're playing right now, Drascore?
The game they're playing right now.
Yeah, they didn't Blinking Line and somebody.
Oh, Ardent Reapers. Yeah, you could check that out.
Isn't
Or
that digital? All digital
yep,
right now?
that's
Yes.
digital.
Oh.
Hey, I see Philly No One's in the audience right now, Wookie. You should talk with him. He's all about like designing board games and card games and stuff.
Well, we'll be in the
should check
corner
with him.
chat here in mere moments.
Yeah.
So
So,
that's my final thoughts. I'm a gamer torn, and I need therapy.
No, you just need to enjoy. You just need to be content with what you have and understand that you have a lot, and we are blessed with what we have.
We'll go with
Alright, too
Keyforge
much
Burnout
hippiness.
next week.
Oh my goodness, not hippiness.
Hippie.
On a
Capitalist
complete
America.
on a different note, we have our 3-year anniversary coming up. You guys are getting old, man. And that is fast approaching in March. So, again, send us those stories. I know, Wookie, you are just absolutely bombarded with stories, Keyforge
Nope.
stories.
I have not gotten a
Joyful
single one.
stories,
Not a
Stories
one.
of complete loss. If not, you're going to just basically have the 4 of us sitting around and having an adult beverage
we're gonna drink.
and reminiscing about these 3 years of podcasting and amazing Keyforge stories that we ourselves have undertaken.
I'm excited for it.
Keyforge and drinks. We got it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I haven't received one story yet. So, yeah. If you want to send us your stories,
Your Keyforge haikus. That's a little
Yep.
There you go.
or you
Yeah.
can just listen to Ewok, Sheep, and Drazkor and Wookie, just sloppy drunk on a Thursday.
Let's do it.
I'm all
Excited.
about sloppy
I
drunk. I
already
say
feel
strange things.
hungover.
We're too old for that. If you
I-
don't want to send your comments to Wookie because you know they won't be read, you can always send them to me at Ewok Jr. That is _0966 on Discord. I'm on most of those Discord channels. You can also hit me up.
He will grade them in red ink and send them back.
Yes.
Mhm,
It is
mhm.
highly likely that they are grammatically incorrect and we'll have to have a chat afterwards, but you will get some feedback.
Yeah. You might. All right. Drazkor, Sheep, what you guys got?
I'm just still having a ton of fun forging keys, and I'd say keep playing, and it's good to play all sorts of different things and have fun with what you're doing.
I'm still waiting for official arbitration on Ewok's incoming face
Denied.
punch. You deny your own face punches.
You
Tara
can't?
already denied. She said it wasn't worthy enough. You
Ooh.
wear a short, stout teapot, so bend over and pour it out.
Well, on that note, I think we're going to call it a night. I don't know. That's going to do it for us this week.
And I will say good luck to everyone who has made it to day 3 for the big Vault Warrior. If you have not checked it out, definitely go ahead. It is this upcoming Saturday. So some great live action. There is still competitive Keyforge that is happening. So a lot of people, and I wouldn't say a lot of people, but there are some people who will be streaming it. So take a peek. But that is this upcoming Saturday, February 26, 2022.
In the past for when you're listening to it, but that's okay.
Yeah, it probably
Yeah,
is going to
there-
be in the past.
There are
'cause
some
that won't-
people who are listening here, so maybe they'll
That's
get
true.
it.
That's true.
I bleed it out, digging deeper
Anyways,
just to
that's
throw
gonna
it
do
away.
it for us
I
this
bleed
week.
it out, digging
We
deeper
will
just
see
to
you
throw
all
it away. I bleed it out, digging deeper just